Hello, my name is Michael Hewitt, and this is Team 4's case study number 3 on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Picture this, Boeing in 2004, and the head honchos come swaggering into the boardroom with what they thought was the ultimate mic drop moment. The 787 Dreamliner wasn't just going to be another plane, it was going to be the plane that would make Airbus executives lose sleep at night. They had three audacious goals: to revolutionize fuel efficiency, have passenger comfort that would make flying feel less like medieval torture, and have operational efficiency that would have airline accountants doing the happy dance. But here's where Boeing got absolutely wild with it. They decided to build this thing mostly out of composite materials, which are basically fancy plastic that's stronger in steel but lighter than your morning coffee. We're talking more than half of the aircraft's weight was made from this space age stuff. Suddenly, planes could cruise around, burning less fuel than a Honda Civic on a road trip. They didn't stop there, though. Boeing threw an electrical system that could probably power a small city, engines so advanced they made jet propulsion look like rocket science, and wingtips designed by aerodynamic nerds who clearly had way too much fun in wind tunnels. The result? An aircraft that performed like a Formula One car but sipped fuel like a Prius. The marketing genius was pure evil brilliance. Boeing looked at passengers stuck in cramped connecting flights and said, what if we just flew them directly to where they actually wanted to go? Airlines could finally ditch their ancient gas-guzzling fleet while offering an experience that didn't make travelers question their life choices. The kicker? Airlines were throwing money at Boeing before they even flew. Hundreds of orders poured in based on nothing but promises and PowerPoint presentations. Boeing had essentially turned aircraft manufacturing into the world's most expensive pre-order campaign, and it was working beautifully. Then, Boeing had what they probably thought was their masterstroke moment. Why build this thing ourselves when we can get everyone else to do it? They went absolutely bonkers with outsourcing, farming out around 70% of the aircraft's design and manufacturing to suppliers scattered across the globe. The logic seemed bulletproof on paper. Cut costs? Check. Speed up development? Double check. Tap into supplier expertise? Triple check with the bow on top. Boeing would just sit back and let the world build their plane, then slap it together in their US facilities like the world's most expensive IKEA project. But here's where reality came crashing through the bedroom windows like an unwelcome party guest. Turns out, many of these suppliers are about as prepared to handle complex aircraft engineering as a goldfish is prepared to perform brain surgery. Delays started piling up like dirty laundry. Quality issues popped up faster than whack-a-moles. Supply chain bottlenecks formed that made rush hour traffic look like a leisurely Sunday drive. Boeing found themselves playing corporate firefighter, constantly swooping in to rescue struggling partners or straight up buying them out just to keep the whole thing from collapsing. Imagine explaining to your shareholders that you had to acquire companies because they couldn't do the job you hired them to do in the first place. The damage was spectacular. The original 2008 delivery date? Let's try 2011. The budget? Let's just say it went from expensive to historically catastrophic. The 787 program ended up being one of Boeing's most expensive adventures ever, turning what should have been a victory lap into a very public lesson in how not to manage complex products. The plane eventually became successful, but the outsourcing strategy became aviation's cautionary tale about what happens when you assume coordination will just magically happen. Boeing's "let's outsource everything" master plan turned into one of the most embarrassing face plants in corporate history. That brilliant cost-cutting strategy, well, it transformed the 787 into a $32 billion money pit that would make even the most reckless gamblers weep. The break-even point? Well, it became this mythical beast that required selling over 1,000 aircraft. 1,000 aircraft. That's not a business plan. That's basically hoping to sell planes to every airline on 3 continents. And reaching that milestone, well, let's just say it took so long that some of the original executives probably retired, had grandchildren, and started telling war stories about the good old days before they finally hit those numbers. The truly brutal part, though, Boeing's rough estimate of lost revenue clocked in at around $30 billion. $30 billion basically just evaporated because their outsourcing strategy had more holes in it than Swiss cheese. Delayed deliveries became the norm. Quality control issues turned into full-time jobs, and Boeing found themselves writing penalty checks to customers and partners in what turned out to be history's most expensive apology tour. The ultimate irony, after watching their carefully chosen suppliers stumble around like toddlers learning to walk, Boeing had to go on a shopping spree to buy back control. They acquired Vought Aircraft Industries and Global Aeronautica, basically admitting, yeah, we probably should have kept this stuff in-house from the beginning. It's like hiring someone to renovate your house, watching them demolish everything, then having to buy their company just to get your bathroom fixed. The acquisitions finally brought some stability to production, but at that point, Boeing had learned the hard way that sometimes the expensive way is actually the cheap way. Boeing's 787 Dreamliner was supposed to be the game changer that would make long-haul air travel revolutionary. Instead, it became aerospace's masterclass in how not to manage a product. Boeing's grand plan was to outsource 70% of development to global partners while they focused on systems integration. It sounds sophisticated, except for Boeing apparently forgot one tiny detail. They didn't have the internal capability to manage such a complex and scattered network. According to Industry Week, the whole thing turned into a coordination nightmare where components showed up late, incompatible, or just plain incomplete. The risk-sharing model seemed genius on paper as well. Get suppliers to invest their money so everyone's financially motivated to succeed. But this brilliant strategy had one major flaw in it. It handed Boeing's control over to suppliers who didn't have the engineering chops for what they had signed up for. The chaos on the factory floor must have been a sight to behold. The Guardian reported that Boeing's internal teams were in panic mode, rushing production and bypassing inspection protocols just to hit their deadlines. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal confirmed that Boeing had to buy back several suppliers, essentially admitting their outsourcing strategy was a spectacular failure. This heat map tells the brutal truth. Boeing underperformed across supply chain oversight, risk planning, and quality control. Integration only stabilized after they'd regained direct control. From a product management perspective, Boeing could have avoided this expensive education by maintaining control of critical system integration and only outsourcing to proven partners, and actually embedding risk accountability throughout the process. Early investment in supplier monitoring and centralized quality assurance would have saved them billions and years of headache. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner program is the ultimate story of, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but that story went sideways. Boeing thought they were being revolutionary with their sourcing strategy, but it ended up being more like handing the keys to your sports car to 50 different teenagers and hoping they'd all drive responsibly. Their aggressive outsourcing model wasn't just about farming out manufacturing. These suppliers were actually designing major chunks of the aircraft. Boeing essentially created a system where problems only surfaced after they'd already wrecked their production schedules. Parts would roll in late, wrong, or looking like they'd been assembled by someone reading instructions upside down and in the dark. The real kicker, Boeing's final assembly teams just became the cleanup crew, constantly fixing what suppliers should have gotten right the first time. That downstream rework turned into a money furnace that burned through budgets and timelines like they were made of tissue paper. With suppliers scattered across the globe, mainly dealing with subcontractors of their own, Boeing lost the plot on their accountability. Their internal teams were trying to manage quality and schedules across a tangled web with about as much success as herding cats in a thunderstorm. The lessons here are pretty brutal yet essential. First, proactive risk management isn't optional, it's survival. Companies need early risk assessments, clear ownership, and escalation protocols locked down before anything gets integrated. Instead, Boeing had a reactive approach that was like trying to steer a ship after it already hit the iceberg. Second, supplier vetting needs to be ruthless. Not every vendor can handle complex design or system level work, no matter how convincing their PowerPoint presentations are. Technical maturity matters way more than cost savings or buddy system relationships. Pilot programs can separate the real players from the wannabes. Finally, centralized quality assurance has to stay in-house, period. Even when you're outsourcing everything else, Oversight, standards, and inspections need internal ownership with shared metrics and dashboards that actually mean something. These aren't just band-aids for Boeing's wounds. They're the foundation for building product development strategies that can actually survive contact with reality. Thank you for your time.